Hey, I turned these blockouts into these torsos, and in this video, I will show you how I did it. The blockout for these bodies were done earlier, and I showed that entire process in an older video. You can find that video in the top right corner of the screen right now, or in the video description. I had my references open in PureRef, and you can see that window in the bottom right corner of the screen. However, I did not record that screen for the female references because I don't know how YouTube would react to that. These sculpts took me around an hour each, 55 minutes for the female body and 48 minutes for the male body. I generally avoid working for too long so that I don't burn out. So I started by joining the masses for the ribs, waist, and pelvis, and then remeshing that entire thing. This completely merges all the meshes into one, and then it's easier to work with it. Then I used the different sculpting brushes to adjust the shapes and proportions of the body a little bit to make sure everything looks good. It is really important to get the big shapes and forms before getting into the details of the body. I already took care of the big shapes earlier, so this part was much faster for me. It is also important to define the anatomical landmarks of the body. These landmarks are basically just parts of the skeleton that can be seen on the surface of the skin, such as the clavicles, sternum, the 10th ribs, the spines of the scapula, the iliac spines of the hip bones, etc. If you want to learn more about these bony landmarks and anatomy in general, I highly recommend the YouTube channel Proco. Their videos are mainly aimed at drawing the anatomy, but it's really helpful for sculpting as well. I'm not recommending any books right now because I don't really read books, but you can look into anatomy books if you're into that. Defining the bony landmarks first really helps with sculpting the muscles later, since most of the muscles are connected to the bones. I hid the breast objects on this body because I wanted to sculpt the muscles first before I joined the breasts to the torso. I also decided not to merge the shoulders with the torso because I want to work on them later when I'm working on the arms, but now I'm starting to think that it might have been a mistake. For the female body, I also did not merge the mesh for the neck because I already sculpted a neck with the head. My main goal was to create bodies that not only look accurate but are also attractive to me. Whether they're accurate or not, you can tell me in the comments below, but I think these turned out to be fairly attractive. There is this 3D anatomy model created by Mark Burnett that I also used as a reference. I believe the anatomy on that model is very accurate, so I had no problem referencing that. I'll put the link to that model in the description as well. One of the main challenges with sculpting anatomy is getting the overlaps of the muscles to look right, especially for the back muscles, I think. There is a very complex overlapping situation happening with the back muscles, and it is quite tricky to sculpt. Not to mention, the latissimus muscle also twists around to the front, and I find that really confusing. Another challenging area for me is the proportions of the muscles. I think that is especially prominent on the female body here. I think some muscles ended up being too big or too small compared to the other muscles and the skeletal structures of the area. For example, I think the pectoralis muscle here ended up being too square-ish and the sternum ended up being a little too long. I'm not sure really. I also ran into an issue with the remesh resolution. I reached very close to the maximum remesh resolution possible and it was getting harder to add more details. I think I could have added a multi-res modifier to add more resolution, but I did not want to do that. I sculpted a few torsos over the week for practice, and I sent screenshots of one to a Discord server to get some feedback. That feedback has been really insightful, but I'm not sure if I was able to put all that advice into practice. So far, I think I had an easier time with the male sculpt. I had quite a bit of fun defining the muscles of the male body, and I also had a better understanding of the male body than the female body. I feel like something that kind of helps me understand anatomy better is exercising. Now, this might not be the case for everyone, but it is for me and I think it's quite fascinating, so I wanted to mention that briefly. Strength training in particular helps me get quite familiar with my muscles and how they work, because not only am I learning the forms, shapes, and functions of the muscle, but I'm also learning how it feels to flex, relax, and stretch my muscles, and I think it helps me understand the muscles more intimately. Again, this is just my opinion, but I wanted to mention it because I think it is really interesting, and I'd really love to hear your opinions on this, so let me know your experiences with exercising and learning anatomy. Okay, let's move on to the breasts. I spent way too long on the breasts. The challenge I faced while sculpting the breasts was finding the right balance between realistic and idealistic. I wanted them to look good, but not overly large. I adjusted their shapes a little bit and then merged them with the torso. I then tried my best to make them anatomically accurate and visually appealing. However, sculpting round forms like the breasts can be quite tricky, and I find it really challenging to make them look good from every angle. It was quite frustrating, to be honest. If I fixed the shape from one angle, it would look deformed from another angle, and I found myself constantly switching between the different angles to make sure they looked good from all the angles. Honestly, I don't even know if it looks good anymore, but yeah, that's the sculpting process for the torso, I guess. So this is what the final versions of the torsos look like, and I'm quite happy with them. It was definitely challenging to sculpt these, but I think in the end they turned out to be acceptable. I have a lot to learn when it comes to anatomy, of course, but I'm pretty happy with my progress so far. I'll probably be improving and refining these even further in the coming weeks, but next week I'm gonna focus on the anatomy of the arms and hands. In the meantime, let me know what you think of today's video. And if you're interested in seeing the blockout process for these models, you can watch that video here, or if you want to watch the sculpting process for the head, that video is here. Other than that, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you later.